All right, looks like we're connected across all the platforms. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today's gonna be a little bit different. Today, we're gonna be delving into some ballistic science and doing an analysis of the ballistic science in play in the recent event, and hopefully, we'll be able to put to rest some of these myths that are floating around and fueling wild conspiracy theories. I don't know if any of you have been like perusing the information related to this. There's also been a large pop up of what would you call? I mean, I would call them conspiracy theories. Pointed at this, that, the other thing, Mossad, Iran, blah 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 blah, all kinds of things that, in my opinion, are just arguably false. Now, I'm not saying that like those places don't may whatever for certain don't have some reason to like do it. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about the fact that the shot that was taken was not professional. It was insanely amateur, and we're going to get into the reasons why. And I will provide the evidence and sources available to me to disprove and clarify as much of this as I can. Give me one moment and we'll get into this. All right. Thank you for that brief moment. So we're gonna get into this at the beginning of basic ballistic science. Okay. So as you can see here, this is a very rudimentary entry to understanding ballistic science. If you look at the picture here, the angles are exaggerated for the sake of illustration, and obviously the sizes of things are not to scale. This is emphasized for the sake of understanding. Generally speaking, this principle laid out right here is the relationship between a firearm and its sights or sighting system if you're using an optic or whatever means you are using to align and orient the placement of your shot. The two things do not run in tandem and in parallel, because if your scope plane, the plane of view, your line of sight was parallel to your line of trajectory, I'll call it. They're calling it the parabolic path, but for the sake of this, we're going to treat them as if there isn't a parabolic to it and it's just a simple flat line shot. If you put them parallel, your optic or your iron sights sit above the barrel, meaning if the two were parallel, both completely horizontal, your bullet trajectory would never cross your line of sight. So that's why you see this 2 point, you have a cross point right here. I don't know if my mouse can be seen. Can it? Mouse, are you there? I don't know. I don't know if my mouse is there. I can't tell. I legitimately can't tell. Okay, it is. All right. So you have your point of intersection here, the first point of intersection. And it proceeds to go above the line of sight, which you may think that seems strange, but that is by intent, based on the fact that gravity pulls the bullet towards the ground as it travels, thereby creating the parabolic path, a nice, gentle, sloping arch that the further it goes, the more aggressively it trends downwards towards the ground, as gravity is allowed more time to act upon the mass of the projectile. So the standard function of the sights on any firearm designed with actual sights that consist of more than, like a shotgun. A shotgun has a bead on the end of the barrel, and that's basically it. If you go back to, even if you go back to muskets, they had two sights for aligning of the aim and projectile, and even those early musket sights have ranging adjustments on them. So this principle is hundreds of years old. It's the same logic in play with an arrow or any type of other projectile. So generally, because of this inextricable relationship between line of sight and the parabolic path created by velocity and gravity, you'll generally not find firearms zeroed for extremely short ranges. Now, things specifically designed to be used within extremely short ranges will obviously be designed to work within the optimal range of the platform itself. That's tangential, as we're talking about one specific incident, and this incident involves, well, basically a high-powered rifle. The weapon in play being actually what most would consider to be a high-powered rifle, as according to reports, it was a modified Mauser K98 platform, rechambered with a 30-06 barrel, which is a very common weapon. After the end of World War II, Mauser rifles were, well, just laying all over the place. Millions of them. So I assume to recoup some financial burden, they were imported all over the world to other countries, and remain more or less as they were, a firearm. And so they weren't destroyed, is what I'm getting at. And despite the fact that these platforms are more than 100 years old, because, well, let's be honest, the Mauser K98, that 98 designation is from its inception into military service, which took place in 1898, or at least the design. Maybe not its acceptance into service. That all gets a little wishy-washy from one nation to another. Very much that its American counterpart at the time, which is chambered in 30-06, being the M1903 Springfield-made 1903 bolt-action rifle. The M1903, I believe, is its acceptance into military usage, but I could be wrong about that. Funny part about the Springfield 1903 and the majority of its variants, they're basically a knockoff copy of the German-made Mauser 98 platform. And in fact, Germany sued America for that. And I want to say America lost the lawsuit, but shortly thereafter, World War One happened, and well, the nobody really cared what Germany was entitled to, regardless of lawsuit or not, given World War One and all that happy stuff. So between the two rifles, you do not have an extremely vast set of differences. This is not like comparing, say, a Mauser to a British-made Lee Enfield rifle. So the two platforms already share quite a bit in common, just in their base design. But yeah, so what I'm getting at here is while they claim it was a 30-06 converted, it may be. The point I'm getting at is that that's kind of arguably negligible. The point being, it's a full-powered, full-size rifle-powered type of ammunition. That's what word I'm looking. Sorry, my brain like short circuits occasionally. So, regardless of if the barrel was converted or not, an old war surplus rifle is a rifle-sized 30 caliber projectile, roughly. Arguably, if it was the original Mauser projectile, that comes in at 7.92 millimeters, which is larger than the 30-06 by a little bit, while the 30-06 comes in at a diameter of 7.62 millimeters. So you can see that size in this case is arguably negligible. We're talking 0.3 of a millimeter in diameter. Generally speaking, the 8 millimeter is still considered to be a 30 caliber weapon platform, despite the fact that it is an 8 millimeter. But performance-wise, they're about the same, more or less. Arguably, the original Mauser was better than the original 30-06 because the original Mauser used a projectile with a better ballistic coefficient in the form of the Spitzer tip bullet, while the 30-06 kind of carried on with the round nose projectile for a reasonable tilt after the Spitzer became prevalent in Germany. So you've got a basic explanation here. Line of sight is the path to the target that can be seen through the sight or the scope or insert aiming system here. It's not to be confused with the path of the bullet, because again, the bullet is affected by gravity. Light, arguably not affected by gravity to the same degree. We can get into the quantum physics of how light is affected by gravity and blah, 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 but the long and short, gravity doesn't make what you see pull down towards the ground. So for the sake of the discussion, we're treating light as a unaffected by gravity, because the distance you would have to go for the light to be affected by gravity to any even noticeable amount is factors beyond what a standard firearm, and realistically even a lot of like large weapons platforms are capable of achieving. So we're just going to ignore the quantum physics of light and go with the base constant of light is unaffected by gravity. Therefore, your line of sight remains true, perfect, and straight. The bullet does not. So generally, a weapons platform will be zeroed for a certain range. Now, a lot of considerations can go into what range you may zero your weapons platform for. For example, like I was saying before, weapons with a shorter optimal range will obviously have their variation within their shorter optimal range. because you're not going to have a, say a submachine gun chambered in a pistol caliber and put sights on it that are capable of going to 1,000 yards, because the bullet is useless at that point. So they have a, fairly determinate range within which they are expected to operate efficiently. And that range is usually accounted for in the design and the supplied means of aiming, be it iron sights or an actual scope or some combination therein of technologies that allow you to orient the direction of your shot. Yes, for the simplicity, like as I said, this is a very rudimentary explanation. He even says, for simplicity, he's leaving out environmental factors, wind, air density, etc., because all of these do affect the bullet. Wind can push it left and right, or if it's going headlong into it, it can slow it down and make the drop more dramatic. And if it's behind it, it can lessen that drop a little bit. It's air density. When the air is more dense, it's thicker, you're generating more resistance passing through the air, so your projectile will bleed off energy faster traveling through denser air. For the sake of all of this, horizontal distance is all that really matters, because by increasing slope, the bullet doesn't really care a lot. It cares about how far it's traveling, how long it's in the air. So, arguably, the downward angling of a shot doesn't necessarily, just because the diagonal is longer, it's more or less akin to flying flat, just due to the way a bullet performs, like the physical physics at play of a bullet. Its gyration, its stabilization, all of that makes it very resistant to things like gravity, and is what allows it to do what it does accurately. So he's got a basic question posited here. Why does it appear to rise and fall on the displayed ballistic chart? Well, if we take a line from the end of the barrel to the target, the bullet is always traveling downwards, because it is. The moment the bullet leaves the barrel, gravity begins acting upon it and pulling it down to the ground. Sights are mounted above the barrel, obviously, because you could not position a sight in the barrel, and if you positioned your sight to the side of the barrel to maintain equilibrium with the actual plane of the bore, you would now have the problem of your aim is shifted off to the side. Well, the nature of the bullet wants to do up and it wants to do down as gravity acts upon it. Gravity is always guaranteed. Wind is not guaranteed. Wind can drive a bullet left or right based on how much wind it may have to pass through, velocity, and a whole bunch of other physics that aren't really important to this discussion. They found very early on that firearms with the sights offset to the side were a lot more inconsistent when it came to zeroing it for a range and then attempting to use it at any other range through what is commonly called holdovers, leading the target, and things of that nature. Which is part of what we're going to get into, is the fact that these principles are very old. I'm going through this rudimentary explanation of them for people who may not be familiar with these. I, being a Second Amendment advocate, am amply familiar with these and understand not only how they work, but how designs have been altered and optimized to work within the physics at play, because the physics are constant. Physics is the laws of the universe. They are always in play. So the things we come up with are merely guides to optimize our usage within the confines of the laws of physics. So with that basic understanding of the fact that your optic will be set in a means at which your projectile will pass the line of sight, go above it, travel, and come back across your line of sight at your preset range. So if you have a 200-meter zero, the round will go above your line of sight, arch, and come back into the line of sight at the 200-meter range, which is how it allows you to aim the bullet at 200 meters when taking account that the two planes are not identical. They are not on the same plane. So you have to account for those changes. The most common way of doing that is like what is shown in the picture. They determine a range, and that is what your zero is set. Now we're going to get into the design of said military surplus firearms and the ammunitions that they use and the performance therein, so we can better understand why it really did not take any skill to achieve this heinous act. In fact, where the target was struck kind of tells us everything we need to know in terms of the skill level of the person pulling the trigger. Definitely not a professional. Arguably, not even an amateur. What they achieved shows the most basic rudimentary understanding of how to use a firearm, especially when you take into account the fact that the weapon used had a scope attached to it, which takes the majority of this out of the equation. The scope still follows the same logic, but within the range at play, this whole scary looking mathematical concept here is basically entirely negligible, and that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to look into the physics of the two potential projectiles, and a couple potential projectiles. As I've heard speculation multiple ways about the projectile itself, so we're going to address the one that is stated, the one that the rifle was designed for originally, and then the modern equivalent to the round that is stated as the chambering of the rifle found. I'm going to show you that regardless of which of the three it could have been, skill plays no role in this atrocity. So we're going to start out with some basic, just some parts. Where's the first one? We're going to go with I don't need that page. That was the Google page. We're going to go with a Mauser K98 iron sight, the sight that came equipped to the weapon from its factory original. Now, you'll see something here. You see all these numbers. To a person who does not understand what they're looking at, this looks like just a bunch of numbers. But when applied to the logic laid forth in basic bullet trajectory explanations, one can deduce these are range settings. These are mathematically measured positions. You would take this block and move it into a position, and that will elevate this rear sight. You see there's a V in the sight cut right here. You align that, and the line created from this to the front sight down to the target will correlate roughly to the bullet's trajectory at said range. Old World War II rifles have a tendency to range out to, you'll see 20 right here. That's a 2,000 meter ranging. While the bullet arguably may still have some energy to be effective at that range, aiming that is not it's not intentional at that point. That becomes what the British often call volley fire, and it's there's an enemy at 2,000 meters, and you're kind of just slinging rocks, hoping that one of them will hit something, and it's mostly just to make them keep their head down. But go down here to the short end, you'll notice something. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and it stopped. Well, why is that? Why does it stop? The number system doesn't start at 3. There must be an intentional reason for it only going as low as 3. Maybe it's just that Germans are strange. They are strange, let's be real. So let's postulate and ponder why it stops at 3. Here we'll go take a look at the American equivalent off of an M1903. You'll see Americans ever affected by ego. They've got measurements to take that 30-06 all the way out to 2,700 meters. I honestly don't even know if a 30-06 has enough energy left at 2,700 meters to do, well, much of anything. And you're certainly not hitting what you aim at 27 meters. But the long end of the scale is not what's important here. So let's go down to the short end. Well, on this, which is arguably a more precision designed leaf sight setup, you'll notice a lot of these have sub notches to really dial yourself in. And these smaller ones at the short range end are very, very tightly packed with no additional intermediate designation. And you'll also notice that it only goes down to 3. Strange. We're starting to see a pattern here. These things don't seem to go down to the beginning of the numerical scale, and I wonder why that is. Don't worry, we'll get to that. But just for the sake of argument, we're going to go over here now, and we're going to take a look at the British contemporary for the time off of a Lee Enfield. The British, much more conservative in their ammo usage, so they're not throwing rounds at something 2,000 meters away. They know that at 1,300 the rounds are unaimed volley fire, and they're basically just to suppress. There's not really much point going out beyond that, and the British seemed to be the only people at the time who really understood that. But again, we're not talking about the upper end of these optics devices. We're talking about the short end. Well, we go down the line. What do we see? 6, 5, 4, 3. But wait, there's something new. Now we have a 2. But we still don't have a 1. Wonder why that is. Well, if we take that knowledge, these are the factory-made tools used to properly range and account for the drop of the projectile for their respective platforms. None of them come down to 1, which would be 100 meters. 2 of the 3 don't even come down to 2. They basically start graduating at 300 and beyond. Well, if we go over here and we look at the performance statistics for the projectile, we'll notice something. These ballistics data tables are done using a 200-yard zero, which arguably was fairly standard, 2 or 300-yard zeros. Which, to be fair, I honestly think this one defaults as a 200 when you've got it wound all the way back. It's not measured because you can't go back any further than 200. And I think that the Mauser performs generally better ballistically due to its use of a Spitzer tip projectile. But we go in here, we look at some ballistic calculation information, we'll notice something. Zeroed at 200 meters, you have a positive rise of 3.8 inches at the halfway point of the projectile's travel. Meaning, using a 200-meter zero, if you fired at a target at 100 meters, your bullet would strike the target 3.8 inches high of your actual point of aim. Now, given that you generally wouldn't be aiming for the edges of something, on a human-sized target, a sub 4-inch bullet rise is not exactly a big issue, mainly given we're talking full-powered rifle rounds, and the temporary cavitation of one of these rounds is going to be more than 3.8 inches. But you'll notice from 2 to 300, you have a nearly 1.5 feet of additional drop. If you tallied it all together, you would have roughly a 21-inch drop overall. So they start at 200 because the inconsistency from 200 across the shorter ranges is negligible, is within what one might argue is a acceptable margin of error given the task it's being applied. But if you look at this, and this is the 30-06, these used, well, I to be fair, in this situation, I believe these are a person's homemade loads. But as you can see, they tried to just get the weight of the projectiles about right and with proper loadings and all of that. But you'll notice the Mauser has a significantly better ballistic coefficient. Now, you can get 30-06 projectiles with a better ballistic coefficient, and you can find 8mm Mauser projectiles with a worse ballistic coefficient. The point being, on average, PowerPoint to PowerPoint is better. If you really account for the way it was originally, this would be a round nose, and its ballistic coefficient would basically be a barn. But all the same, you go down here to the 8mm Mauser, the chambering of the rifle originally, 200-meter zero. At 100, only 2 inches of climb. At 300, only 8 inches of drop. A 2-inch vertical deviation above your point of aim is arguably meaningless. You know, we're talking 2 inches. 2 inches. So You aim at a person's face, 2 inches is well within, as long as you aimed for the center, 2 inches to any side is still a successful shot. If you aim center mass, arguably even the 8-inch or total nearly 11-inch is still an incapacitating shot all the same. We'll pop over here, look at a little bit of different 30-06 because we live in America. There's a wide swath of available 30-06 projectiles. These arguably modern, highly optimized modern projectiles. You'll notice something. These manufacturers use a 100 meter zero. Probably because 100 is arguably the high point in a 200 meter zero. At 300, it's only 14. At 300, this one's only 12. So you can see that they tend to fall. And again, that's 13 from a 100 zero. Where arguably, nope, not that one, sorry, this one. That's 17 inches dropped from 200 to 300. So in that 100 meters from 200 to 300, you have 1.5 feet of drop. On a modern projectile, 2 to 3, 10 inches. 2 to 3, less than 10 inches. 2 to 3, sub 9 inches. You can see modern projectiles, which do take advantage of a lot of the discovery of the Spitzer tip German ammunition. They perform quite a bit better than arguably standard-ish 30-06, and especially older 30-06. Round nose being the worst of. But as you can see on the similarly ballistic coefficiented rounds, 12 inches from 2 to 3, 10 inches from 2 to 3. Slightly higher velocity, so a little bit more resistant to drop based on the rate at which it's traveling. It gets there faster. It was subject to gravity for a shorter period of time. Basic physics. And then just to quash the people out there who bring 308 into the conversation, 308 is basically just a modernized version of a chambering that was attempting to achieve basically 30-06 efficiency in a shorter casing, allowing it to be fed through a shorter action platform. Because the 30-06, I believe, is a 7.62 by 58, I want to say. Sorry, I don't remember its metric conversion because I live in America and I don't really use, I don't convert standardized numbers to metric. I just take the numbers as they are. But point being, you'll see about the same performance, 300, about 12 inches of drop, 15. It does perform a little bit less. You know, if you bang it out to a 200 zero, then it gets a bit better. But, you know, you're still talking a total of 8 inches of drop from its highest point to its lowest point. But about 7 from what you would argue would be flat barrel if you could zero it, whatever. So you see these all more or less perform the same. So the splitting hairs of this or that ammunition really doesn't make much difference. Within the 200-meter range, a weapon of such nature, a full rifle, You don't even have to know the math. Basically, everything falls within the margin of error. And again, that's using a rudimentary iron sight. Now, one could argue your shot must be perfect then for it to fall within the margin of error. But it doesn't. If your shot was perfect, there would be no margin of error. You would know you would be expecting roughly 4.2 inches of drop. You would be expecting roughly 3.5 inches of drop. You would be familiar with all of this. This is what a normal marksman, sharpshooter, sniper would call dope, data on previous engagements. A person familiar with the platform that you're using would have no need for an actual written dope chart or anything like that. You're within such a tight range that the margin of error is negligible. Any skilled shooter would know that the margin of error is in fact so negligible that a professional shooter would likely pull something like this off with iron sights, because again, within 200 meters, 3.5 inches of drop on a 30-06. A 2.5 inch difference is not enough. The problem is no trained sniper would aim for the neck. It's the thinnest part, thereby making it the easiest to miss based on the more difficult to factor windage and the wind's effect on your bullet. So arguably a skilled shooter, marksman, sniper, trained long-range engaging shooter would target the chest or the head. You would target the head for, well, the logical reason of just assured destruction of enough to cause fatality. Or you would aim for the chest for best assurance of actually hitting your target. Now, I've heard many people say, hey, Scotty, but I've heard many people say that, well, they wouldn't have shot for the chest because Charlie was wearing body armor. I'm sorry, but I invite you to go watch that video again. The man is wearing a t-shirt. You could argue, oh, he had, you know, low profile, what do they call it? Concealable soft armor. That wouldn't have made a difference because soft armor is not rifle rated. I know this because I own several examples of body armor that are to be used for ballistic testing at a later time. But since I've got them on hand, we're going to give you some education. This right here, this is your standard soft vest. It's soft. This is a concealable. It's soft. It's thin. You can put it under a decently bulky shirt and it not be super noticeable. It does employ additional plate, additional soft pack armor panel, and well, I can tell you right what is rated. These additional panels are rated for a standard 9mm. These are low grade level 2 additional panels. You can get them in level 3. Level 3 is rated for up to a 44 Magnum. Nowhere in that list will you find any kind of rifle round, for one simple reason. Rifle rounds are traveling extremely fast. Soft armor is entirely defeated by things going extremely fast. In fact, even small things like 22 Magnum will go through a vest like this like it basically isn't there. Now we have the more commonly seen external, again, soft. This is a soft vest, but this is a higher rated soft body armor. I don't believe this is rated for rifle either, to be completely honest. Can I actually get to one of the panels directly for the sake of discussion? I don't think I can. Wait. There we go. Sorry, bear with me, but I got to feel this out. Okay. All right. This actually doesn't say what it's rated for on it, but this is a level 3A soft panel. NIJ standard says a level 3A is, just so we're all clear, NIJ level 3A soft armor rating. As I thought, 357 SIG, 44 Magnum, lower velocity, 9mm 40, 45. So it's good for your standard handgun ammunitions. Some people will argue that in some cases they will stop some intermediary rifle or carbine projectile, and they very well may. But the long and short, they're not rated for it, so don't expect it to do it. Now, I'm sorry, bear with me a moment. I gotta put this all back in itself. Again, I apologize. This is well, you generally don't open, so they're not exactly meant to be easy to open and remove and put back. So this is just a bit of a struggle, for which I apologize putting you on. All right, good enough. Talking about body armor. Concealable body armor. Not going to do anything against a rifle. Bulky, yet still soft body armor. Generally not going to do much against a rifle. Realistically, generally not going to do a whole lot against smaller carbine either. As far as things rated to successfully stop something like a 30-06 platform, that's when you get into this. Steel, hard, ceramic, things of that nature. You get this. This is extremely bulky. In fact, as you can see, almost an inch thick total between plate and carrier. You're not hiding this under a t-shirt. But this is rated to stop a 30-06 projectile. I think they actually even make a step better than this that'll stop a 30-06 black tip armor piercing projectile. But on that note, even if he had had this, it wouldn't have made a difference because he was not shot in the chest. Armor only covers the chest. I've seen lots of videos out there speculating that it went down the way it went down because he had something like this concealed under his shirt, and the speculation being the projectile struck the plate somewhere in this general area, upper left side, thereby causing the round to deviate upwards and into his neck. Physics does not support that. Well, I don't know. I know physics does not support that, but I realize this is educational, so some of you may not. My W key is dying. Let's just do a rudimentary bullet versus armor plate. I don't want a 10-minute video. Give me like a 30-second video. We don't need sound, but let's add it anyway. All right. You guys see the fireworks show that took place in there? That is what happens when a high velocity projectile impacts an armored plate. It disintegrates. It does not just deviate. Armor plates are hardened and abrasion resistant. They are not soft steel that is keen to absorbing and returning and gouging and the things that lead to deviations and ricochets. Can you ricochet a projectile off of a armor plate from a plate carrier? Yes, absolutely. With a shallow enough impact, it will absolutely ricochet. Problem being, we're talking about a straight-on shot. Straight-on shot, close to straight-on shot, arguably anything within the 60 to 90, but we'll be conservative for the sake of I don't have actual numbers. We'll say anything between 75 to 90 degrees of head-on. So that gives you a 30-degree forward-facing window, is likely to not ricochet and instead disintegrate in a flash of firework and sparks and metallic fragment. So these people saying under his shirt was something like this, which caused it to deviate. I'm sorry, people, but you're delusional. So now that we've gone over the arguable technology in play in the situation, well, debatably in play, because my argument is there was no body armor. It's just a man and his faith and a fucking t-shirt that said freedom. But you still have these people out there driving conspiracies, acting a fool, celebrating the death of a godly man who sought only to speak. The people celebrating, I don't need to do anything else to discredit them. They discredit themselves every time they open their mouths. But we can put to rest some of these crazy conspiracy theories. We don't need to know about 3A soft body armor anymore. We don't need this. Honestly, I realistically probably don't even need any of this page anymore. So we're just going to flip to the just chatting, and we're going to just discuss from here. Goodbye. All right. So you've got these people out there swearing up and down this was a professional job. This was a trained assassin. No. No, absolutely not. The shooter was seen on the roof. A professional would know to better scout, better manage their means of ingress, their means of egress, and do everything to best optimize their chances of getting out of there. This retard laid on an open roof in plain view at the edge of the roof where people were literally able to just record them with their phone. Well, look at that. There's a person on the roof. Isn't that strange? Well, unfortunately, this man is not an actual politician. He has private security. He does not have the authority to bring in things like Secret Service sharpshooters to watch rooftops. So you can't really discredit his security too heavily. They just aren't on that level. Could they have done better? Yes, arguably, absolutely. Could they have done things like employ drones to monitor? Sure. We could argue about all of that till we're blue in the face. But the long and short, the shooter took an unprofessional sniping position, made no efforts to conceal himself, was out in the light when he could have, when literally available to him was a shaded area, which obfuscates your silhouette and countless other things. So clearly the shooter had no functional understanding of Oh yeah, Scotty, I'm right there with you. It's insane what these people are doing out there. The most horrifying part is that people I fucking know celebrating that shit. So on the upside though, they've revealed themselves. It makes them very easy to extricate from your life. You just cut the ties, let them go do whatever the hell they want to do, and you remove that kind of negativity from your life. But point being, the shooter had no arguable skill. His shot placement was poor because no trained professional would aim for the neck when the chest and the head are visible. You can make the argument Charlie was wearing body armor, so they had to shoot for the head. But he wasn't wearing body armor, but we'll entertain the idea that the shooter made the assumption that Mr. Kirk was wearing body armor. A professional would understand that body armor isn't fucking magic. All right? It is only rated to a certain point, and beyond that point, it's little more than a t-shirt. So a trained professional wouldn't have been even the slightest bit perturbed by body armor, especially because they're a trained professional. They're going to understand their weapon platform. They're going to understand the margins of error in play at a mere 200 meters. As horrible as it is to say, a professional assassin would have hit Charlie Kirk in the head with no issues whatsoever at that range. The fact that he was hit in the neck is the biggest giveaway that the person pulling the trigger was not professional, was not even amateur. I would argue at most had the most basic understanding of how a weapon system works. They used a literal magnified optic at 200 meters. That tells me they used whatever was available to them in terms of weapon system, not a professional with an optimized intent orient built weapon system. Because I'm going to be honest with you guys, 200 meters is nothing. That shot could be made with a 22 long rifle. And based on U.S. Army, the U.S. Army standard test for a bullet's efficiency, a basic 22 long rifle is lethal out past 400 meters. The drop, even on something light and slow like a 22 long rifle, is fairly negligible within 200 meters. And, well, look at the actual history of trained professional assassin. They don't generally engage things from long ranges, especially like you've got all these people out there saying that this happened to Charlie because he was beginning to put together the strings with Israel. The way Israel's assassin squads work is literally well known. They spent decades hunting Nazis. If their goal is to kill somebody, the death is something that must be 100% assured, which is why if you watch or read or look into anything about the Israelis who hunted down the Nazis, they had a very particular method by which they did so. And that was to heavily scout and then confirm the target, monitor for when it would be most vulnerable, and then ambush it at that time. They did so usually in extremely close quarters with multiple people wielding suppressed handguns chambered in 380. That's fairly common, actually, if you look at the historical context of, well, I'm not exactly sure what you would call it. It's not really espionage, because espionage is more business related. But we'll just go extra political assassination for the titling of it. If you look at the history of extra political assassinations, you'll notice, for the most part, a trend. They majorly tend to happen at extremely close range with arguably small, non-powerful weapon systems. In some cases, highly customized weapon systems that are almost, one might argue, purely powerless, like the CIA's heart attack gun. The thing is little more than a overglorified pellet gun that's got just enough power to put a very, very small projectile into your body with negligible kinetic energy damage, and then it relied on a toxin on the pellet to kill you in a manner that was, for the most part, unprovable and untraceable. Very much the same. I think it was the Russians, the guy who the ricin pellet. Hold on, we'll pull out another tab here, and we'll look into that, because I like to have at least close to accurate information when talking about things like this. Assassin. How do you spell rice? RIACIN? No. RICIN. Well, that'll get us close enough. The ricin pellet. Yeah. Georgy Markov. Assassinated with a customized umbrella. Man was Bulgarian. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Grigory Yeah, it was Bulgarian, and he was the one who was assassinated on a London street using a micro-engineered pellet that might have contained ricin. Long and short, it contained something. It contained something toxic. So what I'm getting at here is extra political hitmen, for the most part, tend to not enact their task anything even close to what we saw take place. They tend to get very close so that they can guarantee success and elimination of a
That's one
target.
serious umbrella technology. For that time I didn't know it was a dang umbrella.
So customized umbrellas. Let's go to the other one. CIA heart attack gun. Oh, well, would you look at that? The SAC-46. Clandestine handgun. Gun, dart, carbon dioxide propelled. It didn't even use explosive propellant. Point being, made to be extremely quiet, extremely effective, utilized within extremely close ranges where it guarantees success. That is the general standard to which extra political hitmen operate. That they're not just meandering out onto a well-lit roof in an open plaza to take a loud shot from 200 meters away. I'm sorry, it's not the way it works. That's not how actual intelligence agency assets perform such thing. It just isn't. It's too crude. It's too open. It's way too many variables in play. When it comes to something like an extra political assassination, there is a much greater level of care taken to assure success. And that's the funny part, is that still doesn't ensure success. There are countless extra political assassination attempts that did not work at all. I mean, the CIA is another great example. CIA and the exploding cigar that they tried to use against Fidel Castro. Long and short, it didn't work. They tried all kinds of things to eliminate Mr. Castro, and they failed. That's because they could not get Mr. Castro in a situation that was standard for the way extra political hitmen like to operate, which again, much like Mossad Nazi hunters. I forget what exactly they're called. I'm sorry. I forget things like that, but I remember the gist and I can get close enough to at least get myself back on the right path. After the end of World War II and the escape, release, and whatnot of countless Nazi war criminals responsible for heinous crimes, you had whatever the fuck it's called, the Gelen or whatnot. Well, wait, no, Gelenorg has to do with the Nazis. That's the wrong page. Yeah, this is just more talking about it. Well, long and short, I can just get straight to the point. They used. Sorry, I'm really bad at spelling. Beretta 83. No, I think it was the 84F. Blah, 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 blah. Come on, talk about the actual gun. That's all I care about. Okay, we're going to take off the 84S. We're going to go 80 series. That's what they used, was the 380 chambered Beretta 80 series. Or, well, I guess it's now the 80 series. No, is that... see, that's not exactly correct. They didn't use the 71. I mean, they may have earlier, and the 22 long rifle was also commonly used by America's OSS through, like, I think they were still even using the high standard 22 long rifle up through Vietnam. And it was used for, again, extreme close range, very good ability to be suppressed, and it was employed at, again, just extreme close range where you assure success. But I swear they used the... They used the cheetah. I can't remember what the Mossad Nazi hunters were actually called. Sorry, that'll get me on the right track, I believe. Blah, 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 blah. Operation Finale. Okay, well, whatever. That's I guess semi-tangential. We can likely find the gun itself. God, I still can't spell Beretta. It just does not. Was it the Seret Matkal? Maybe. The long and short, Mossad uses small caliber suppressed weapons at extremely close range, and usually multiple shooters. That, like I know for a fact, one of the Nazis they hunted down, when they did finally spring their ambush, they basically sprung it on him in a stairwell, and like one or two came from down the stairs, one or two came from up the stairs. They basically boxed him in. They all proceeded to empty magazines into his body and then go on their way. They do it in this manner because the small caliber suppressed weapon utilizing subsonic ammunition does not have a great range. But extra political assassinations lean towards the greatest possibility of escape, because if you get caught, then that's all bad. So obviously, a professional extra political hitman, say a Mossad agent or the IRGC or any of these other governmental entities that crazy people on the internet are trying to say are behind the Charlie Kirk assassination. I'm not saying they're not, because I have no idea. They very well could be. I am just saying nothing about the ballistic science in play would support a professional government agency hitman. Okay, that's what I'm getting at here, is the science available and the basic understanding of said science tells me this was not a professional. A professional wouldn't have hit him in the neck. A professional would not have missed his point of aim within 200 meters. A professional would not have abandoned his weapon in the woods. He'd have stashed it far better than rolled up in some carpet and thrown in the woods. A professional would have had a means of getting down that did not involve suspiciously running across an open roof with the sky as a backdrop in all black clothing. Well, realistically, being at a professional would have gotten extremely close. That's usually how governmental professionals work, as I was kind of getting at. Mossad using 22 long rifle, the CIA designing a fancy heart attack gun that uses compressed air to drive a very small dart into the target. Grigory Markov being killed with a modified umbrella that basically injected a small pellet covered in a toxin into his body. These are known extra political assassinations, and if you look at extra political assassinations historically, you'll find that the majority take place at extremely close range with extremely small caliber and quiet and arguably highly ineffective weapons. They are either modified to make them highly effective, or as the case of Mossad and some of the Nazis they eliminated, they understand that the tool does very little damage, but if you do very little damage enough times to enough vital places, you can achieve the same effect. So Mossad tended to spring multi-person ambushes in which they would, just empty a magazine of 22 long rifle into the chest, face, head, killing Nazi. So my point in all of this is the people saying that it was professional are insane, and they do not know anything about ballistic technology or the physics at play in any ballistic situation. So that's what I'm trying to kind of quash out for people. Any kind of concealable vest would have done nothing against a 30-06. The only kind of body armor that would have done something against a 30-06 would have been massively noticeable. And yeah, BMAD, exactly. A professional, skilled marksman would have engaged from a greater distance, been better hidden. It's just dozens of obvious glaring problems. Would not have been on an open roof, would not have been at the edge of the open roof where people could see him, would have been inside of a room with darked out windows and at the back of the room. And there's a whole philosophy that goes into it that I don't need to go into, because there's plenty of glaring problems with the idea without even getting into the depth and the scale of what goes into the training of somebody actually trained to take life. A professional sniper knows to not be on an open roof, not be out in the open with the sky as your silhouette. Just countless things. And, so you take the best shooters in the military, they all know better, but people will still argue, well, this isn't the military, this is acronym agencies and extra political, secret groups, the intelligence agencies. Well, the intelligence agencies don't work that way either. They like to be real up close. So 200 yards wouldn't work for them. If it was them, you'd expect 2 yards. And it would be at a time where the person themselves likely didn't even know anything happened, because that's the way the intelligence agencies work. They use toxins, small arms, things of that nature, and everything is based around the best ability to escape afterwards. This situation was carried out with, you could argue, zero thought put into how they were going to escape afterwards. They made no effort to hide their location. They did what they did They stood up on the roof and began running. I mean, could it be more obvious? You might as well have taken the shot, stood up with a bullhorn, and began proclaiming from the rooftop, I did it, I did it, look at me, I did it. Because people hear a singular gunshot. What does the basic know nothing mind tell you? Where am I going to look for a sniper? Rooftop. Which is actually wrong, which is the funniest part, because a real sniper would not be on a rooftop. They'd be in a room and there would be nothing to look for. So we're literally talking about idiots making the determination that they know some shit based off of the actions of another idiot who clearly didn't know some shit. But these idiots think, sniper, rooftop, retard, rooftop, rooftop, rooftop. Oh, sniper, master marksman. No, I'm sorry. These people are morons. This was not a professional. We've covered the weapons, the way they were designed, the thought process in the design, the fact that the majority of them originally don't even allow you to dial your zero in any closer than 200 meters, because the margin of error from 0 to 200 on a rifle of that class, be it long barrel or short barreled like the 98K, because technically the German Mauser 98K is a carbine. It's the carabiner. It's the cut down version of the original Mauser long rifle. The American 1903 is a rifle. It is not a carbine. It has a 20, I want to say it's 24 to 26 inch barrel, but it could actually even be more than that. 1903s, I think I have 4 of them. I have a Rock Island Armory 1903. I have a Remington 1903. I believe I have a Springfield. And then it might be another Rock Island. Because I've got one Rock Island that is original to the T as it was issued by the military. And then I have another one that I got really cheap that someone had sporterized into a hunting rifle. And my intent was to track down the stuff to little by little convert it back into what it was originally, because I can't stand people who sporterize military rifles. I mean, I get it. All right, I get it. People came home from the war. They had rifles. They needed to hunt. They used what they had. They converted it to be similar to their hunting rifles. In some cases, they converted the calibers over to things that were more readily accessible. I understand the sporterizing of firearms. But it hurts my soul to see historical firearms butchered down into sporting weapons. I don't hate the people who do it. I'm just being honest that seeing it causes my heart to weep, because it's like the defacing of a statue or the burning of history books. You just don't destroy stuff. Even if it's made of the enemy and whatever, you don't destroy history. I mean, don't get me wrong. You want to like go in and grind the swastikas off old grandpa's old Mauser rifle that he brought back. I mean, personally, I still disagree with it, because I don't think you should allow people to escape their shame. And by defacing Nazi insignias off of all the things they made, you're in a way just kind of sweeping them under the rug. I personally believe that kind of stuff should be left intact, especially on the items, because that reminds us why we did the things we had to do and why we had to do it. By defacing it is how you get this new modern era. People who will argue that, in their opinion, You don't even have solid evidence of the Holocaust's happening. That's fucking insanity. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of Israel, Palestine, this, that, the other, blah, blah, no. But I will talk about the fact that what took place in Europe in World War II fucking took place. You can argue about the details are wrong, the this is wrong, the that, the little bitsy pieces is here. There is ample footage, photos, that there is all the proof in the world you need to understand that the Nazis ran fucking death camps. Now you can argue and split hairs. Oh, it's not 6 million, blah, blah. Does it fucking really matter? Does it? Does it matter if it's 6 million, 600,000? Honestly, in my opinion, if it had been 60 fucking people, that's too much. 6 people murdered for no reason, that's too much, in my opinion. Any murdering of people for their genetic lineage or your own deluded ideologies, it's too fucking much. Sorry. Unless a person is actively a threat to you or other people around them, I do not condone using violence against them. Now, yes, you can argue, oh, well, blah, 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 Hitler. Like, yeah, all right, I got it. Yeah, no, definitely. Once he started, like, eliminating people and shit like that, like, yeah, well, he himself didn't physically do it. Like, yeah, but he's enabling it. So that kind of becomes a really lame argument. Like, oh, well, he's not doing it. Like, yeah, but, he's paying the checks to the people who are. So culpability comes hand in hand. Like, you know what I mean? Very much the same that if a person hires someone to kill their wife, they're responsible for the death of their wife. Yeah, that's how that fucking works. So yeah, when Hitler's ideologies stepped into a realm where people's lives were being oppressed and people being taken, let's be real, being taken, because oppressed is a very vague word that could be interpreted in a lot of ways. When people started being beaten, rounded up, and eliminated, every moment after the beginning of that, the violence is justified. Prior to that, some people would argue that the violence is justified. I personally would argue that the violence was not justified. Yeah, don't get me wrong, hindsight's 2020 and we're all 80 years down the road, so we know what Hitler would become. But prior to him actually taking those steps is speculative. To me, speculation is never enough to justify enacting violence against people. And I'm sure some psycho leftist will be like, oh, well then, what about Iran and Trump? He bombed their nuclear thingies. I don't really consider that to be violent. Because to be fair, they were fairly well warned that it was going to happen. Some will even argue they were so well warned that they had ample time to take the stuff out and run off with it, which I also don't really believe. You're under the illusion that those people are capable of organizing, and I don't think they are. So they were warned, and we broke some of their toys. I don't really see that as violent. I see that as throwing a wrench in the gears, absolutely. But with what they're trying to achieve, they kind of need a wrench thrown in the gears. And to be fair, I think that's the most peaceable way to approach that, was instead of eliminating the people in power who are enabling said facilities to attempt to do whatever they claim they were attempting to do. So they broke some of your stuff, which they arguably you shouldn't have. That doesn't, I'm sorry, breaking stuff does not, in my mind, violent. You know what I mean? Like, very much the same. If someone takes your protesting sign away from you and tears it, that, I'm sorry, that's not violence. They didn't hurt you. You can make an argument that your property and all of that, and I'm a advocate for the protection of one's property within reason. I just, I don't think it's violent. To break somebody's property. You could argue that the other person should be liable to replace your property. Yeah, that's a solid argument. And, as per any normal people, you could have that discussion. But again, Iran was, well forewarned about how that would go down. So to try and cast aspersion onto others is really disingenuous. It really is. But yeah, I'm sorry, we're getting really tangential here. I think I've pretty much covered about what I've got to provide to this, this at least this breakdown of the ballistic sciences at play. The amount of drop on the projectiles at that kind of range, negligible, arguably within a margin of error that would not affect the efficacy of the shot if taken by an actual professional who knew how to use a gun, or even by a mildly skilled amateur. With the application of a glass optic scope, this is a shot that any idiot could take. You could put a poorly calibrated rifle into the hands of a small child, and they could pull off basically a shot of equal quality, if not better. He wasn't wearing body armor. Had he been wearing a body armor that you wouldn't see, that is concealable enough to not be visible in the video, would not have done anything against the rifle used. Thereby, there'd be no reason to avoid taking the shot to the chest. If you were a professional, skilled, extra political assassin, you would know these things. A skilled shooter would have used far more foresight and logic in their positioning, their escape route, all of it. And again, most political based assassins generally do, like, by another government, extra political, intelligence agency type stuff. They are far more often dealing in extremely up close, totally random seeming. They don't come after you in the middle of an event with thousands of people around you. They come after you on a random Tuesday at the gas station, on the sidewalk, that kind of stuff. So hopefully the information in this video has been educational to some, or comforting to others, at least in the understanding that a lot of these insane claims you may be seeing on the internet are pretty much just crazy people who don't know what they're talking about, because the logic and the science of the situation just doesn't seem to lend itself to what it is they're saying. Yeah, I want to thank everybody for stopping in. I see this actually kind of blew up into a bit more than I expected it to, and I want to thank you all for stopping in. I really do appreciate you, and I'm glad to have been able to maybe shed some light on the details of this situation that are likely to be mostly ignored, because this is just the science of the technology in play. And, well, most people just aren't going to be concerned with that, so you're probably not going to see much detailed analysis of it. And firearms as a technology and the science therein are something I have spent a lot of time learning, researching, consuming. So I happen to have enough knowledge to be able to approach this topic from a mostly scientific standpoint with a little bit of, real world supporting evidence to help support my postulation. Again, I don't know if any of this is, truly foreign government or not, but the things obviously available to us currently would heavily suggest to me that it isn't. Uh, yeah, I want to thank everybody for stopping in. You guys are awesome. I hope you liked the video. I hope it's got information in it that maybe you didn't know, or that maybe will help you to be able to better explain to people that some of these ideas out there that people are putting forth, they're just insane. Uh, Sadly, this was just a horrible act committed by a shitty person, and the world is currently reeling with itself to figure out how how to make sense of it. So that's why I wanted to touch on at least the part of this that I feel comfortable in my level of knowledge to hopefully have been able to provide you guys with something meaningful in terms of the science and the understanding of the incident and the weapon and the physics underlying therein. Uh, Again, you're all awesome. I really want to thank so many of you for stopping in. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope some of you return in the future. I know I'm usually just streaming video games and nonsense because I like to I like to stay casual, but sometimes in life things happen. You have to step outside your comfort zone and speak the truth you know to be truth. Uh, by that I mean the physical science in play that is immutable truth. There is some opinion in here, but that is opinion of mine formed out of the immutable truth that I know to be directly correlated to the technology and the science in play. Thank you all so very much for stopping in. I really do appreciate you. Hopefully I don't have to do another video like this about something horrible that's happened. I would love to just, do fun, lighthearted firearms, technologies, videos, discussions, things of that nature. But yeah, again, thank you guys all for stopping in. You're truly amazing. I'm going to wrap this stream up here and switch back over to the normal casual gaming, whatever. Feel free to join that and come discuss anything you want. I'm always open to discussion. Or you can join my Discord and we can engage in discussion directly there. You can tell me horrible things about how I'm wrong, and I welcome it. Again, you're all amazing. I love